how to blow this stuff up, because we were supposed to have a Royal Engineer to do the blowing job. I said to Captain Griffin, I know a little bit about explosives. Well, he said, you better get at it then. So it was just a case, there was 2 I-beams under the bridge. It was a case of somebody standing on my ankles so that I didn't fall into the River Deeves and reach underneath and put the plastic high explosives, it's like plasticine, and put it on the bridge. Told everybody to clear off, and at 3:20 a.m. I blew it. It wasn't completely blown, but nobody could drive a tank or a car or a Jeep or anything else over it because it was dipping in the water.
At sea, the men contemplated what was ahead of them on what could be their last night on Earth.
And of course, we all got letters off home, to let the family know that we were in good shape, and we couldn't say anything about D-Day or anything, but I think the general public had a pretty good idea that it was coming soon. We'd been all equipped at the camp beforehand with our battle dress that had been gas impregnated, so anti-gas in case the Germans used gas. And it smelled terrible, and the battle dress was very hot because it filled up a lot of the weave in the battle dress.
They gave us bacon and eggs for breakfast. And I said to the guy, my men, I said, so the condemned man ate a hearty breakfast.
A few of them tried to eat, but most weren't successful in that. 3 of the companies were carrying the airborne bikes, and 1 company was to be carried on the carriers, which is D company, the company I was with. One of the reasons for that was the fact that they could only load so many bikes on these landing craft with all the crew.
We could see the outline of the flotilla, and that's all you could see, ships all over the place, literally hundreds. Big ships, small ones, large landing craft, landing ship tanks.
The view was also spectacular from the air.
And suddenly over the intercom came the word, my God, they've got a whole brand new island down there. And this was all the ships that were going across.
I eventually hooked up with some people from C Company who had been there much earlier. We just eventually found our way by getting out onto a road and finding some road signs, and then moving towards our rendezvous place, which was actually in a place called Le Mesnil.
While many Canadians were making their way to Normandy, members of Bomber Command were just returning.
Well, the adrenaline's flowing by then when you get out of the aircraft. When you open that door and get down on solid ground again, and you start to look at the list of the aircraft reporting in, well, most of us would go and hang around there looking to see, oh, Joe got in, so-and-so's back, so-and-so's back, and we'd have bacon and eggs and whatnot. Well, the mechanics would work on the list of deficiencies or things wrong with the aircraft from the night before.
We got up at 3 in the morning to be briefed by the intelligence people and by our wing commander. So we had 3 roles, but on D-Day, our role, the role I took part in, was to do a low-level visual reconnaissance of the city called Caen, and then to come back over the beaches and do a patrol and reconnaissance and a defensive action, if necessary, over the beach. And you're going in against a lot of gunnery, flak, searchlights, and all. The searchlights caused a bit of trepidation, shall we say. We bombed at 03:54, so we bombed at about 4 o'clock in the morning.
we bombed gun emplacements. And we were not told of Juno Beach. So what we got is a message saying, do a good job, fellas. Okay, we got out of there. We, quite often, we were given a route to fly to get off the target, and then we had a route to fly home.
We had Sterling bombers that were flying back and forth over the English Channel, and they were dropping tinsel, which would be called a nickel raid. They would be dropping tinsel down so that the enemy, when they were reading on their radar screen, they would just be blipped out. They would think that there were thousands and thousands of aircraft there, where actually there wasn't any.
At first light then, which was early in the morning, some of us were allowed up deck. There were the gathering of the storm, as it were, of all the various types of boats and so on that were going over, and they were arranging them in their order and flotillas and so on.
It started to get daylight around 4 o'clock, a little bit of light, so you could actually make out movement down the field. I clearly remember two gliders, one coming in for a landing, another one, he was starting to straighten out about 100 feet up, and another one came over and the two collided. Jesus, there were guys coming tumbling out of the air, and most of them were killed landing on the ground. And what a hell of a sight that was. From there we knew in the general direction where we were supposed to be, where our battalion was supposed to be.
So we're out in the open sea. And it was pretty rough at that time because it was open. We were in a landing craft tank, and we had our two armored bulldozers in front that belonged to the 6th Field Engineer Regiment with the sappers with them. And we had two sections of mortars, which means that each section had two carriers with a trailer behind one of them, and to carry extra ammo and extra rations. The rations were supposed to be good for 2 weeks, just in case we didn't get any. We had compo boxes. And bread's supposed to last for 21 days. I asked the service corps guy how come it was could last 21 days. He said it's got formaldehyde in it. So whether they meant it, so that means that if something happened to us, at least we were partly embalmed.
And then break at dawn. It was just break at dawn when we seen this landmark. We knew it was France right away.
And when we arrived off the coast, it was still a lot of clouds. Not raining anymore, somewhat broken up, but still a lot of wind, and but the wind had died down a fair bit, but it was still very choppy.
Meanwhile, members of the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion were still trying to reach the rendezvous zone.
And we pushed it for another 2 or 3 hours, and that's when we met up with a column of troops who turned out to be a 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion column, who were heading for what we called the brickworks, or the crossroad, or Mesnil, as we called it in those days.
Everybody was to not return, but head for La Manille to the high ground and form our defense line. Now the men staggered in there for weeks. They were still coming in. We know that some men, individuals, were, if they were caught by any Nazi troops, they were shot. If they were caught by regular army, they could surrender if they were trapped.
We were ready to be airborne at about 5:30. So we were airborne at dawn that morning. Below, the waves were intense on the water, but the whole sector, all the way across from Portsmouth and Southampton, those are covered with ships, boats, vehicles of any kind on the water.
By that time, we had consolidated around our rendezvous point, which was for us at this brickworks near this sort of village of Le Mesnil.
And there weren't too many of the Germans in that particular area at that time. We weren't there very long before we were digging. We were in a holding situation. We were to protect that flank so that the Germans couldn't get reinforcements down to the beachhead.
Many of the men traveled across the channel in larger ships and began loading onto the landing craft just off the shore of Normandy.
From that big ship, we got down into the little one, then we went in.
Climbing down the scramble nets on the side of the ship and into the salt craft. Of course, the salt craft were lowered before we got down there, fortunately.
And the whole ship would have these scrambling nets, and I almost fell in because the waves were coming up, and I went to step in, and the boat was down. So lucky I was hanging on.
Am I going to get on this thing without falling in the water? But after it was all over, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Then it took quite a long time for all those ships, landing craft, that to get out and get in a row.
For some unknown reason, likely we were ahead of schedule, they pulled us around in a great big circle, and when we did come in, daylight was pretty well on.
As the invasion forces approached, the bombing of the coastal emplacements by the Navy began.
The battleships that were out further were firing inland, and the shelling that was going on overhead was tremendous.
And as we moved slowly in towards the beach, HMS Rodney, which was one of the Royal Navy battleships, was behind us, and at about 6 o'clock they started pushing in their heavy armament.
I remember that these shells were going over and they sounded like freight trains.
They really sound like a lot of rush, you know.
But when those big naval guns let blast, wow.
And of course, we didn't pay that much attention to what was going on behind us because the main thing was me. I had to survive.
It was, I guess to say the least, very, very, very noisy.
In fact, they gave us little bags, like Simpsons Eaton's bags.